Um, so today's training is on writing offers. There were other few topics that we, may discuss in the future. I try to do these every 2 weeks, but as you guys probably know, we've been going through a whole heck of a lot. So I haven't been able to do these, but I'm happy to finally have the time and be able to be back and doing a team training. And it's on a topic that I am, pretty proficient at, which is writing offers. For some of you, you may know I'm licensed with California and Florida. Much better at writing California offers than I am Florida. With Florida, still learning some things. So still trying to get used to Florida, writing Florida offers. But writing offers is pretty important part of being a real estate agent. Would you guys say you agree with that? Shake of the head, comment in the chat if you want. And so sorry, I may clear my throat a few times. I don't know why, but my throat has not been cooperating. But writing offers is definitely something that it's a learning process, right? If you haven't written one, it's probably pretty daunting thinking about writing an offer. And not to discourage you guys, but it does take a while, because it's a lot of legal jargon. And even though we're not attorneys, we do need to understand the contract. And so it's really important as a realtor to be proficient at it and keep practicing it. And your clients will rely on you to know that contract and to explain it to them. And so it's super important to know the contract and what what the offers, are, and what's in the offers, what terms can be negotiated, what cannot be negotiated. And just knowing how to guide them through. Now, I'm not saying that you should know everything and that I know everything, as they're part of the contract that I probably don't know and need further clarification on from a broker or, the legal team. Sure, there are going to be instances where I'm like, wait a second, what does that item mean? But the most important part is that you are finding out what that item means instead of just assuming that you know what it means, or just ignoring it and hoping that no other client brings it up to you in the future. So I've always been the type of person where if I don't know it, I'm going to go find out. And so that's kind of how I've just always been with my business. And so if you ever, well, Jason is probably the only one that I've written an offer with. And well, he's written the offer and then I reviewed it. But for any of the past team members or current team members tell you how much of a Nazi I am at writing offers, and I'm pretty a stickler of like, hey, you didn't check this box. And the reason for that is not to be, aggravating to you. It's because there's an important reason why that box is being checked. And by not checking a box, you could exclude something for your client. And now you either have to tell your client that they don't get that certain item, or you have to try to negotiate it into the contract, or it's money out of your pocket, or you risk getting sued by your client, which obviously I think none of us want to be sued by our clients, right? So, and if you are a California agent and has ever attended a contracts class by Debbie Penny, she touts the fact that 30+ years for her, she's never had anything against her license, and she's very adamant about that. That's why she's like, so you can tell how much of a passion she has for teaching these contracts, because she is so good at it. So like I said, some of you may not have submitted an offer yet. Some of you will be submitting offers. But one of the things that I want to tell you guys is, like, if you haven't submitted an offer yet for a client, the time to practice is not when the client wants to submit an offer, when you finally get that client, right? You want to have practiced it before that. So if you don't have any active clients, that's part of the reason why I have in the onboarding those practice offers. And you know, some of you may have had that, some of you may not have had that in your onboarding, but it's something that I added later on because something that, oh yeah, I know, I wish they recorded the contracts classes too, but they won't for legal reasons, which is funny because Florida does. But whole different state, right? But oh, where was I going? Where did I leave off? Where did I forget what I was saying? Somebody remind me.
Some of us may have had the training in our onboarding course, and some
Oh,
may
yes. So that way you can practice the offer. Thank you, Mel. So that way you can practice the offer. So that way you don't get yourself into the situation where your client, and of course those situations, you know, can happen, to where the first time you write an offer is the first time that you get a client and they need to write an offer. But if you can, try to do multiple practices before that, write different kinds of offers. And that's the reason why I added that to the onboarding. If you haven't done those practice offers, now is a great time to go back and do those practice offers. Because I try to set it up in different scenarios to give it to you guys. So that way you at least are a little bit familiar with it. It makes you go to SkySlope. It makes you pull up the offer. It makes you like look at all of these forms that go with it, right? So that's, you know, big reason why I put that in there. So the way you guys will have that whenever you are, you know, ready to submit an offer for a client, you're like, oh, I got this. I know where to go for contracts. I know, you know, at least a little bit about how to fill it out. And so that way you're not scrambling at the last minute. If your state has a contracts class, make sure you're going to that. If you don't know where to find that, go to expcloud.com, and for your state, it'll list out the trainings. If you're in Florida, there's also a Florida state training group, I believe that's what it's called, where you can go back and you can find all of the recorded videos with how to fill out the contract. Just make sure you find the latest version, so the way you're filling out getting info from the latest contract. Contracts do change, like California changes on a yearly basis. They're always adding like a new form. Like I feel like in the future these things are going to be like 100 pages long because they want to keep adding forms, and I'm like, this is ridiculous. We can't, as agents, explain absolutely everything in all of these forms, so it's kind of crazy. But those are always changing, so paying attention to all of the changes happening when you have, and this isn't just for offers, right? This is for all forms, but just know that these things do change on a consistent basis, usually on a yearly basis. They take a look and they go, what can we change in this contract? Some states will be short. I think Florida contracts only like 10 pages in total, if that. In California, I don't even know what they're up to right now. But it's like the contract added it along with other notices and stuff that they have to provide to the client. So just if you aren't going to your contracts class, make sure you're going. California has a contract workshop, so like an offer workshop. If you're not attending that, I believe it's on Thursdays. Don't ask me the time, just go on Workplace. It'll tell you the time in there. I don't know what other states offer those workshops. I know California does, but other than that, I have no idea. But the best way to find that out is go into your workplace state group, and they will tell you what all classes that they offer you from the brokers. So my job as a team leader is not to train you on the contract, but rather assist you with writing a strong offer. So I'm not saying that if you come to me and it's your first time writing one, that I'm gonna just push you aside, right? I'm going to help you, but understand that my role is not to explain every part of the contract to you. That's what's so great about EXP, because EXP has those phenomenal brokers who are there doing those contracts classes, so that way they can explain it to you guys, so that way they're equipping you with the knowledge, because they're the ones meeting with attorneys, meeting with meeting with the attorneys and figuring out what needs to be in the offer and all those forms associated with it. So I let them do with their thing, because I will always, if there's ever something that I tell you that conflicts with the broker always wins. They're always going to be the ones that I say you go with, because I'm not the broker. I'm just the team leader. And so my job, my role to help you guys is just helping you write that strong offer, right? Helping you position yourself and your client to be the ones that win on that offer. And this is something that we, not to pat ourselves on the back, but this is something that we do really well. And we've learned how, over the years what works and what doesn't work, right? So we can help position you guys to get your offers accepted. So so there's that. So, and how well you write your offers can be, depending on whether or not that your client gets that dream home, that they get accepted on that home, and how many times it takes them to get accepted on the offer. And of course, it's not always indicative of a bad offer, right? It's sometimes just the market. Like if you guys were writing offers back in 2021, 2022, you would have been like, well, dang, I wrote 20 offers on 20 different homes and I still didn't get my client accepted. And back then it would just be because the market is so on fire that houses were flying off the shelves. Now, in today's day and age, if you write 20 offers for 20 different houses, there may be a strategy that you could, work on. But honestly, in this market, it is dependent upon, the area and what's going on in that specific spot. Is it a desirable area? Yada yada. So, but anyway, so offers are definitely something that you guys should know how to do and know how to write a strong one, and make sure to take on that responsibility for yourself and your clients to be very proficient at contracts. And I'll tell you guys that this will make or break how well you get through a transaction. This will make or break how well you can get through issues, because even if somebody on the other side has been doing it for 30 years, if you know the contract better than they do, guess what? You win. You win for your client. And I'm not saying that it's a win or lose situation. I'm just saying that you know how to protect your client. If the other side is saying, oh no, we need this instead of that, you can be there to say, no, 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 let's go back and look at the contract. So pride yourselves, guys, on being that agent that is like, I'm going to stick with what the contract says. And not that you're not going to be negotiable, because things do change and things do need to be flexible sometimes. But that always has to go in writing. It always has to be made a part of the contract. But know that whether it's your first time, 10th time writing an offer, that we are here to help support you guys in writing that offer. So with that, we can get into it. I just wanted to preface it with all of those things. Does anybody want to add anything before I get into the actual writing of the contract? No? Okay. If you guys have any interjections or any questions or anything, just go ahead and either unmute yourself or put it in the chat, or raise your hand, whatever you want to do. And so today I'm going to go over just like guidelines as far as offers goes, because we're all in different states, right? So I can't necessarily guide you on what exactly your state is going to want to do unless it's California or Florida. And so whatever I say today, make sure you're referring to what your state does and what your broker tells you. So I just wanted to preface it with that. But so before you guys write your offer, write your first offer, of course, you're going to go into SkySlope and you're going to bring up offer forms. There are templates and such that you can use from your state broker. Your state broker should have some templates in there. And so there will be those in there for you guys to use. But anyways, so an offer constitutes a few things. So offer price, obviously, initial deposit, down payment, and all the other terms and conditions. Now, what those are going to be pretty flexible based upon what the offer is and what kind of property it is, and multiple other factors that are going to take into account. It could be in a trust. It could be a probate. It could be an REO. It could be any of those things. And so there's going to be multiple different things that you guys have to look at before you write that offer. You're going to want to have the MLS pulled up right beside you That's what I've always done. I have the MLS pulled up right beside where I'm writing the offer. And I make sure that whatever the listing agent had put into the listing, that I'm going by what they asked me to do. If there's any supplements, you're taking a look at that supplement, whether it's disclosures, anything like that, that they already provided to you in the MLS. And so you're taking all these things into account. Sometimes they'll put in there whether the seller wants a lease back, if you guys know what that is. So sometimes they'll put in, you know, closing plus 3 days or what have you. And sometimes they'll put in seller needs to sell their property first. So there's a seller contingency. There's a sale contingency, so where they have to sell their home first. Now, this is called different things in different states, so don't get confused if you're using terminology that you don't know. But it should be pretty similar terminology. So anyway, so you're gonna want to, it's gonna have to come from the MLS and of course what your buyer wants to do in that specific scenario. And so yeah. So first of all, you're gonna, you know, talk to your client about what the purchase price is. Of course, you're gonna put that purchase price in. But one thing I want to cover was the initial deposit / earnest money deposit. Who knows what that is and who wants to tell everybody what it is?
Tasha, that's your money down, or the kind of the money down that your buyer client wants to use to secure the property or make the contract valid. It is applied to the overall purchase price, but it is separate from the down payment.
Right. Thank you, Joe. Sydney?
Tasha, according to Zor yesterday through our SkillBridge meeting, that's typically a 1%, right? That's what you guys usually see?
It depends on the state. California is very much a 3% state where the seller wants to see that full 3% earnest money deposit. If you're in Florida, you can get away with 1% or less, which is crazy. But California, really, like the sellers and the agents want to see that 3%. But if you're in a different state, like it could be like different. So for him, Hawaii, probably 1% is sufficient. But that's a great question because it will vary, and knowing what your typical is going to really help out. But yeah, I'm glad, Joe, that you clarified that initial deposit / earnest money is not a down payment. It comes out of the down payment side, but that initial deposit is saying, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, my buyer is super serious about this offer. So this is the amount of money they're willing to put up at risk should something happen and they're not able to complete their sale. And yes, there's other inspection contingencies, yada, yada, that play into that. But this is, you know, overall, that's what that means. Any questions on that? So if you have somebody that wants to place a, okay, go ahead, Joe.
Hey, Tasha, I would probably just add, at least out here in California, Debbie Penny was pretty adamant about, like, do not go over your state's kind of standard earnest money deposit, because it puts more of your buyer client's money at risk. And so, you know, yeah, we're 3% is kind of the standard here in California for that. But her recommendation was, you know, don't be that agent that puts 10% down, you know, or tells your clients to put 10% down for earnest money deposit, because you could risk losing that money if for some reason the contract fails to execute.
That's an excellent point. Yeah, Debbie knows her stuff. So yeah, that's what I would say too. Like in Florida, don't put down 3%. Like that's too much here. So and people think you're crazy. So yeah, go by whatever your state says. Because yeah, your client could be liable for that full amount, which you wouldn't want to do to them, right? So all right. So let's say you have a buyer who wants to place an offer for $530,000 and their initial deposit is 2%. Who wants to calculate what that would be that you would put in the initial deposit amount?
Are you giving us public math, Tasha?
Oh, I am, and I'm bad at math.
$10,600.
What's that?
$10,600. I think if I got your numbers right, it was 530,000 and then it's 2%.
Yes, sir.
Cool. I got
Yep, you're right.
10,600 and I saw Carrie and Jason had that too.
Yeah, I know. I'm making you guys do public math. Guys, I suck at math so badly, so badly. But if I can do it, you can do it. Believe me. So, it took me a while, guys, to get the financing section. So whatever state you're in, you're always going to have, you know, the standard things that you have to calculate. Make sure you get that financing portion correct, because if you get this wrong, this could mean life or death for your buyer, right? Because not all agents are going to be flexible and be like, oh, I'm so sorry you made a mistake. It's happened to me, guys. I've made mistakes and I'm just like, I want to kick myself, you know, for doing that. Because I submitted an offer too fast, or, you know, what have you, or I wasn't thinking, or, you know, I'm used to a VA and it's a conventional. Oh, shoot, like I calculated that wrong. But just know that it's going to be different, right? So there's several different things that you're going to have to fill out on that financing section. Purchase price, initial deposit, loan amount, and balance at closing. Those are all the things you're going to want to know how to calculate. So we just did one on initial deposit. Now everybody knows what to put in for purchase price, because that's what your buyer is telling you that they want to offer on the property. So this we don't have to come up with on our own, right? This is what the buyer tells us that they want to submit for. The big parts is making sure you get the initial deposit right, you get the loan amount right, and the balance at closing. Now, this may say different things on your offer. Who has a state word that does not say that? It says something different. Okay. If it does say something different, no worries. I'm just asking just so that we can make sure we're all on the same page with the terminology. It may not say exactly those words, but it's okay. We're all talking about the same thing here. So loan amount, that's the loan amount that your buyer will have after they make that down payment. So it depends. If they're a VA buyer, they're offering 470. Guess what? Their loan amount is 470. That makes sense? So
Yes.
you have the initial deposit, but that's not to be confused with a down payment, right? That's an initial deposit, not to do with the down payment. So it can be confusing. You're like, wait a second, thought they didn't have a down payment. Yep, no, it's not a down payment. It's just an initial deposit. And that's why their loan amount is 470. They're not putting anything down. Now, can a VA buyer put something down? Absolutely. Yes, they can, but a lot of times they're not putting anything down because they don't have to. It's 100% loan. So if they're making an offer for 470 is what it is. So that's in the loan amount, and then balance at closing. And so, for balance at closing, you're calculating what they have to bring to the table at closing. And so, let's see if I can give you, let me pull something up so I can give you guys an example of that. Or if anybody has an example that they want to use, they can go for it. Am I making sense, guys? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, Tasha, it makes sense. It's also probably worth noting that, you know, your escrow company should really be handling like all those calculations, and we're kind of more or less doing the double check just to make sure our clients are, you know, we're representing our clients well kind of managing the transaction on their behalf to make sure that the numbers reflect accurately, I guess, is kind of what I'm trying to say.
Right.
I would also add, sorry, I'm a little sick. Talking to your client's lender and ensuring that you guys are on the same page regarding what the offer is going to be and that they're covering everything, especially if it's a VA.
Yeah, because they could get that full amount back for their initial deposit once everything is over. I've had VA buyers where the balance is 0 at closing. They have nothing that they need to bring. They're like Jason, he just submitted an offer, and you can talk to it, Jason, too, if you want. But his I'm so sorry, I lost my friggin' point to that. What is wrong with me?
So this is my offer. Sorry. My offer is $15,000 over asking or over list price, which is what my client and I decided to do. $15,000 over list price, with a 3% concession to the seller, to the buyer, sorry, as well as and Tasha will probably cover this later on. The seller covers my commission.
Oh yeah, that's what was gonna be my point, is that you asked for your client's closing costs to be covered because they didn't have the money to bring.
Which
But
is why
yeah,
I
like he
also
said, it's super important to talk to the lender, make sure that they have that, those financials to bring. Go ahead, Jason.
that's why I also asked that question. Does everybody know how to break down proof of funds? So when I went into this one, I didn't really understand that necessarily. And I thought I put us in a pickle, my client and I. Luckily, talking to Clark, that wasn't the case. Hopefully, if this offer gets accepted. But yeah, I think breaking down proof of funds and your client understanding that is extremely important.
Yeah, I've gotten a question from multiple buyers who, when I asked them for proof of funds, and I'm like, can you send me a bank statement? They're like, wait, I already sent that to my lender. And so that may be something that you guys get in the future too. So just explaining, like Jason said, like what that proof of funds is and why do you need it? Because they're like, well, I already sent this to the lender. It's like, yeah, you sent it to the lender, that's to get pre-approved, but they're gonna want to see that you have the ability to cover that down payment or any closing costs that you're gonna incur. So people get confused, right? As far as what that is and why they need to provide you with it. And so, yeah, being able to explain that to them so that way they understand, why they need it a second time. You can also get like a letter from the lender. This is not a pre-approval, but like a letter for the funds for the lender saying like, hey, I checked them out and they're good. But I don't typically see that sort of thing happening in residential. It may happen more in, different scenarios, but yeah. So I couldn't find an example for you guys, but based upon the loan balance, but that's basically, like I said, what the buyer is going to need to bring to the table at closing. And you calculate it
Tasha,
differently in each state. So there's no way for me to tell you like, hey, put this in this line, 'cause it's gonna be different. Go ahead, Joe.
I've got a quick question on that proof of funds thing. As Jason was talking through that, this question popped up, but do we need to see funds or proof of funds? I mean, I would think, again, I would rely on the lender that would need to be able to see that. And does that proof of funds need to be liquid or semi-liquid? So does it need to be in a bank account, or can that be, let's say they show me their stock portfolio, which is in individual stocks, and they could easily sell it today if they wanted to, and their proof of funds is, $1.5 million, like way more than they're going to need for a $136,000 down payment or something like that. Do I need to see that? But that's, again, semi-liquid versus, fully liquid funds.
Yeah, I mean, wherever they're pulling the funds from, they're gonna need to show that and show that they have the ability to pull from it. The biggest thing to explain to them, is if they get accepted on an offer, they have to provide that proof of funds, or they have to provide that initial deposit at least within 3 business days. Now, if they're pulling it for their down payment, they don't have to have that until several days before closing, but they'll want to have that ready. Does that make sense? But they have to
Yeah,
show that they can
that
pull it.
clarifies it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, they always have to show that they can pull it and just let them know, like, this is like, you only have 10K for earnest money. But if you want the extra 100K that you're pulling out of, whatever account, you have to have that ready a few days before closing, because they have to wire that amount to escrow. Any other questions or inputs? So going back to the different loan amounts, right? So VA buyers, actually super easy to fill out that financing section because there's very little to put in. But now if you have like a 10% or a 3% or a 3.5% loan, anything like that. So that's going to base upon whatever loan type that the buyer has at that point. If you're unsure what the buyer loan type is, you're going to need to get on the phone with their lender. You're going to need to get on the phone with the buyer. How much do you have available for a down payment? Because you're going to need to know these things. And, sometimes we like to be prepared in these situations, but sometimes things move really fast, right? Sometimes you don't have time to have those conversations. So at that point, you're going to need to talk to the loan officer, and you're going to need to talk to your buyer. And you're going to need to figure out a strategy from there. So making sure that you have that info before you fill that section out. We're never, assuming things for our clients. We're never committing them to financial decisions and anything like that, because they need to be involved in this process, right? This is what they're committing to should their offer get accepted. So being sure that you know what that is. So if we have, I'm sorry guys, I have to do public math. Give me 1 second. So let's see. So you'll have scenarios where it's okay, your client has a 10% loan. You have to calculate what's the 10% of that 500,000 to be able to put whatever their loan amount is in that spot, right? So the best way to calculate this is whatever the purchase price is, you're going to do times whatever that balance is going to be. So if they have a 10% loan, what is their loan amount going to be? It's 90%, right? So let me know if I'm losing you guys. So what you're going to do is you're going to calculate that 500,000 by whatever remaining amount that's going to be that they're going to have to finance. That's one way to calculate it. If that confuses the crap out of you, you're going to have to just do it the longer way. And sometimes I do it the longer way because I forget about that. So let's see if I can give you guys. So if they're putting, if their loan amount's going to be 90% because they're bringing the 10%, you're going to put 450,000 in that loan amount. Does that make sense? I think I did my math correctly. Joe's give me a thumbs up. I guess that means that I did the math correctly. Okay, thank you, Carrie. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay. So that's what you would do for no matter what loan type that it is. Obviously 100% is easy, but you're gonna have different scenarios, different buyers and such that have a different loan amount. And then of course, calculating out that balance at closing. So you take into account the fact that they have the earnest money. That's taken into account already in the down payment. So don't count that twice. All right, any questions on the financing section? Because that's one of the biggest sections. Or does everybody hate public math and I can move on? All right. I'm gonna move on. If you guys have questions after that, let me know. Believe me, guys, I struggle with math, but unless I have to do it publicly, I'm okay now at doing it. In the financial section. All right. So let's say we got all of our loan financing section filled out. And so now we're going to move on to other items. So there's several different things that are going to be in the offer as well. Home warranty, lease backs, escrow/title, depending on what state you're in, inspection periods, and then inspections versus appraisals. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Closing periods, expiration of the contract, and included versus excluded items. So let's talk a little bit about home warranty. Now this can be confused with the home insurance. Home insurance is going to be different. That's something that the lender is going to want to see. And so that's going to also vary per state. But the lender is going to want to see the buyer get home insurance. So helping the buyer with figuring out what company to use, yada, yada. Here in Florida, you definitely want to look at the flood insurance, especially if it's coastal. So if you are in any of those areas, it's definitely going to be something you want to, keep in the back of your mind. But home warranty is something different. So, your state may have it's normal to ask for a 1-year home warranty. And so, this is something that you can have your buyer ask for, or you can use it to try to strengthen your offer and tell your buyer like, hey, you can still purchase your own outside of escrow. After you close, you can still purchase a home warranty plan, just you don't have to ask for it with this. But that is different than the home insurance piece. California, Florida, pretty standard to ask for the seller to pay for the 1-year home warranty. And this is something that the buyer chooses. Typically we don't see the seller choose it unless they already had one in place. So sometimes there will be rare instances where they already decided on a home warranty and they already paid out for the year. That would be like the only circumstance that I would think that the reason why that they would choose one instead of the buyer choosing one. But that is pretty standard in California, Florida. If you're in a different state, it may not be the case. But just have some home warranty recommendations for your buyers so that you can recommend here's a few different options for you. Now, you guys may also have your own experiences with home warranty companies. I know I have, and not all of them are great. It's kind of hard finding a good one. But there are circumstances where, they'll cover things like our water heater went out and they covered for the, that whenever that went out. And so it can have its benefits, but home warranty companies are also a pain. So that's why I don't really necessarily choose for my buyer. I like for them to choose, but sometimes that's a hard conversation to have, as you're trying to figure out all the other information. So you can always just put buyer's choice if you have a spot in there. If you don't know a company and your buyer is I have no idea who I would use, that gives them the inspection period. During the inspection period, they can figure that out. You can help them figure that out. Here's 3 different brochures from 3 different home warranty companies. Figure out who you want to use, what coverage that you need. Of course, you can help them figure it out too, but make sure they're the ones making that final decision, especially for coverage items, because you don't want them coming back and getting mad at you because you're hey, they don't cover my, whatever. And you told them that they would, even if it's the home warranty company that tells you that. So any questions on home warranty?
Tasha, for home warranty, do you have that on the list for the vendors here in California? Like on the resource?
Yeah,
site?
Fidelity is one that I put on there, but there's also America's, America's Home Warranty, or there's also First Republic, I believe, because it's title, but then I think they also have home warranty. But yeah, there's several different ones on there. There should be.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Anything else on home warranties? I mean, it's pretty straightforward, but so something to note is For the amount, that's kind of hard to guess on whenever you're filling it out, if you haven't gotten any, sort of quote from a home warranty company before. So what I would say is call a couple home warranty companies and ask them, you know, just maybe for like a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home, what their quote would be to give you a general idea of what to put in there. Usually somewhere between $500 to $800 covers a standard home. Like something that's not ginormous. If it's a very big house, 4 or 5 bedrooms, 3,000 plus square feet, that probably won't suffice. Or if it has a pool, probably also won't suffice. So it just depends on several different factors, whether or not that home warranty amount is going to be covered. And just know too that like, so we've had several instances where buyer asks for $600 worth of coverage, but they want to add on several items, whatever that would be, and say it's an extra $100. Some escrow companies will allow the buyer to pay for the extra $100. You just have to go through the escrow company and get that approved for that to happen. Because they have to see that amount match, and they're pretty big on that amount matching, and so they may not be able to pay for that extra $100, which sounds crazy, but I've seen it happen numerous times. So, but anyway, so that's home warranty. Any questions on that? Any other questions on that? Okay, moving on. Lease backs. Jason, do you want to talk about lease backs? What a lease back is? What you're able to ask for your client?
They fill out the RLAS form. But basically it's where, yeah, they can just, you close escrow and they can rent back for however long. Most
Sorry, I
VA
put you on the spot.
yeah, most VA lenders, well, Clark, he said up to 45 days. Some could be up to 60. So yeah, whatever helps out. And then when you're filling out the form, make sure you put a deposit, amount for the deposit, amount for the however many 30 days, how much 30 days is gonna be, and then per day breakdown also.
Sorry, I put you on the spot and you're sick. So basically there's going to be instances where the your buyer can allow the seller to stay in the home after closing, or the seller could ask for something like that, right? So that's what a lease back is. It can also be called a rent back. It can be called several different things. So that's basically what it is. The seller wants to stay in the home after the fact, and sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're a free lease back for the seller. What I see those in markets where it's competitive and the buyer wants to get their offer accepted, knowing that the seller would like to stay in there longer. So that could be a way to strengthen your offer to get your offer accepted. And those were used a lot, a couple of years ago as well. Don't see them as often now, but it may become, more prevalent again. But anyways, so that's what it's going to be. And so the RLAS is a California form. So if you're a California agent, residential lease after sale, and so that's basically what that form is. There's 2 different forms that you use depending on if it's a 30-day or a 60-day. And don't worry, we can help you figure out what those forms are. It actually says on the offer which form you use, whether it's 30 days or 60 days. So it even gives you a little cheat sheet there. But if you're not California, there is a form, in whatever state you're going to be in. It talks about lease back. And so basically the buyer becomes the landlord, seller becomes a tenant. And so it creates that sort of tenancy, landlord-tenant situation. And so it's kind of a weird thing, and it's kind of different, especially as the agent trying to figure out all those nuances. And But it can be done. Of course, there's risks and stuff with it, especially if you're in California, because the landlord tenant laws, and technically the landlord is the tenant now, or I'm sorry, the seller is the tenant. And so it does kind of create a little bit of a weird situation there, and a risky situation there, because there has been things that's happened in the past with the seller staying in place, and, you know, are they going to cause damage? Are they not? And so asking for the seller to pay the buyer some sort of deposit on that lease back is going to really stop that chance of the seller causing issues as they leave the home, because they're like, well, it's not my home anymore and I'm just renting it. But they still need to take care of it, because give something for a security deposit. You don't have to charge them thousands and thousands and thousands, but at least a few thousand something, so that way if they do damage it, at least there's some sort of compensation on the buyer's part for the seller damaging the property as they leave. So making sure that you have all of those terms negotiated as you're submitting the offer. We've had many agents try to go back on what the terms were. And so you're like, oh, okay, yeah, lease back, we'll negotiate that after the offer is accepted. In my experience, don't do that, because it's a mistake. Because people try to negotiate several different things, and then we're stuck in a scenario where it's like, well, we're already in escrow, and now, you know, they're trying to negotiate a couple days before closing, and then we kind of feel like it's like a catfish situation where we're like, okay, we're good to go on this lease back, and they try to stick the buyer into an you know, not an ideal situation. So it's just something that I, you know, made mistakes from and learned from after doing it, because I would be too lazy or too busy to submit that lease back form as I submitted the offer. Don't be that agent, because it goes to backfire on you, and then it backfires on your client. Okay, Justin, see you later. But so yeah, so make sure that you submit that form. Each form's going to say different things, so I don't really want to go over any specific form, right? But hopefully that gives you guys an idea of what a lease back is, and why you would want your client to, you know, provide that, and why those scenarios come up.
Tasha, I have a question.
Go ahead.
So just so I can better understand a lease back, maybe it differentiates, but would a lease, so basically when I was selling my house in North Carolina, because I got orders here to California, I basically told the buyer, like I accepted her offer and this and that, but I told her I can't leave yet because I'm still waiting on my orders. So I need to stay here for like another like 3 weeks until you can actually move in. But I don't remember signing anything like a lease back. Is that just something different that my agent wrote in saying, oh, you can't move in until X after closing date? Because I didn't pay anything, or I don't remember signing like a lease back form or anything. It was just, I just remember seeing an agreement that she wouldn't move in probably until 3 days after closing.
I'm sorry, what state was that?
North Carolina.
Yeah, see, there, that may be different there. They may not have to have a form there, but I would imagine that they would, because I don't see how you would not have that. Yeah, she wrote it in, but I don't know. Unless they don't care, but I don't see how they would not care, because it's creating a difference in, you know, situation. But I guess it could happen. I just feel like, you know, you're not really protecting your client at that point.
Or I can probably be confusing it. I might have just told my agent that we'll close as it gets closer. And then I think they allowed like, 2 to 3 days of, I could stay there for like 2 to 3 days after closing. I don't recall. But
Oh,
yeah.
okay. So 2 to 3 days after closing, typically there's nothing that's
Okay.
Filled out.
Gotcha. Okay.
So yeah, 2 to 3 days, it's all good there. But anything more than that, I would definitely get, a lease back or something filled out. Like a temporary occupancy or something like that. And then sometimes there's situations where, oh, Jesus said that's what he did on his house. Sometimes there's situations where the buyer wants to move in before it closes. Would anybody know why that would be a problem? What creates issues with that? Does anybody want to chime in on that?
I would think insurance would be a huge concern. I mean, if they burn the place down, you know, and they're not on a lease or something, that would be a huge problem, especially if they're not the owner yet.
Yeah. What other issues? Nobody? Nobody wants to guess anything else? So if they don't, if they move in before, like Joe said, like they could just cause all of those issues. And also, what if they decide that they're not gonna move out, even if they don't close on their loan? So they could not close on their loan, and then they're already moved into the house. And then there's also, in some contracts, it explains whatever's left in the property, is, well, so I guess I'm going the opposite direction. Okay, nix that. You just gotta think like, okay, what if they move in their personal belongings, right? And they don't close? Well, who owns that now? Whose property is it? You know what I mean? Because the personal items are in the property. So it can create all sorts of issues with early occupancy. I know California is pretty anti-early occupancy. Florida is a little bit more lenient when it comes to that. And they're not as risk averse to that. So it just depends on the state. But yeah, I try as an agent not to have that be something that's offered, just because you can create multiple issues whenever you're doing early occupancy. But that's not typically a part of the offer. That's something that could happen in the transaction for one reason or another. So hopefully I didn't confuse the crap out of you guys with that. We don't have too much time left. Is there any, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a second part to this, because I'm not gonna be able to get through the rest of what I want to do. So let me just make a note. And who has questions to wrap up?
Question. I actually have two questions. So
Uh-huh.
when I was doing the mock buyer offer, so we're both in Florida, so we'll have like the same I mean, this should be an easy one for you. When I was doing the mock buyer offer, I joined the Florida auditorium, the broker auditorium on eXp World, and I asked for a broker's help I just asked what forms am I supposed to include in this offer, right? So I don't miss anything or leave anything out. And she didn't have much time to help me. So, but what she told me was, I know what you're looking for. I asked her like for a checklist. And she was like, I know what you're looking for. It doesn't exist because there's like over 75,000 different combinations of forms and stuff that can go towards an offer towards a house. So you got to look at the MLS and you got to figure all this stuff out so you make sure you get the right ones. Well, how do you determine which ones are the right ones? I know there's like broker templates, but when I looked at the broker templates for the offers, there was like 10 different ones.
Yeah.
Then it's like, what if I don't pick the right one?
So
And then
yeah.
I
Okay.
also want to ask, what if you left something out? What happens then?
Yeah, those are great questions. So I agree with what they said. With it does depend on the situation, right? But what you primarily need to know is you're using the as-is FAR/BAR contract. This is for Florida agents. If you're California or somewhere else, it's not for you, but you're using the as-is FAR/BAR contract, and you're using the to get compensated, use that direct compensation form. And so as far as everything else, it's just gonna, like they said, it's just gonna vary. But that's primarily what you need to know as far as writing the offer. So hopefully that helps. Like you're gonna use the as is, and then the as is and the MLS will basically tell you like, okay, you know, additional addenda or whatever, you check box, like, okay, it's a probate sale. So of course you're gonna check box probate, those sort of things. Or if it's
Okay.
an investor, you check that box. So it's gonna vary based upon that. But what you primarily need to know is you're filling out the as-is FAR bar.
So for sure, you need as is, you need a direct compensation, and you need the buyer broker agreement. Those three,
Yes.
right?
Yes. So
Okay.
just to simplify it, because it's a hard question to give a straight answer to.
Yeah.
But that's what you need to know is you're filling out the as-is FAR bar contract.
Okay, but let's say I go to submit an offer with my buyer and it's like, oops, I forgot this form. You know, what happens then? Who corrects that?
So hopefully you have an agent on the other side that's willing to help you, and work with you. But you correct that with, so we have a TC, a transaction coordinator. She can help you with correcting that. So say you submitted a VA offer, but you forgot to submit that VA offer form because there's an additional
Yeah.
form that you need to submit with it for VA offers. So say you forgot that form, the TC would help you with getting that form into the transaction. Or Sky Slope, because people like EXP is going through and checking through all of our files, right? Like, hey, Chris, you need this form and this form and that form. And so that's a really good like way of like, oh, okay, I needed that form. But and you'll also know like, because we'll help you whenever you're submitting your first offer. And if you're like, hey, I have a VA buyer and you submit an as-is FAR bar, but you don't submit that other form with it, or you don't have, you know, any of the other forms, so we can like, hey, Chris, like you forgot these forms as well. Make sure you submit those forms.
Okay. So how does SkySlope know that I'm forgetting forms? Do they look at the property on the MLS and determine which ones I'm supposed to have?
No, so well, yes and no. So Sky Slope through EXP, so that's how they monitor is you're going through, and because you're logging onto your Sky Slope account with your EXP, that's why when you do have a transaction, the transaction coordinator needs all of the documents. So if you get an offer accepted, you send the transaction coordinator your documents, they create a file within Sky Slope, and so they know the checklist to go through for that. And so that's how they know, because EXP goes through and that's all the paperwork and stuff that they monitor. And so they'll go through and check for like, okay, this is a required form. You need to make sure to get this filled out. And so the transaction coordinator helps you with that.
Okay.
So, but yeah,
Cool. Thank you.
that's how that works. Yeah, hopefully that helps. Any other questions? Was this helpful? Hopefully it helps to answer some questions that you guys may have had before,
I found it
or maybe
helpful.
didn't know that you had.
I think once I do some of the just now that you re-uploaded the SkySlope training video on for onboarding, I'm actually going to start practicing the offers. And I think by the next time we have this team meeting, I'll probably bombard you with more questions.
Okay, sounds good. Yep.
I have a quick question on Vulcan 7, but it has nothing to do with this meeting. So
Okay,
I
so
can wait until.
I'm just gonna end the recording, and then whoever needs to leave can leave, and then I can answer random questions.